Good morning. The committee meets today to consider the nominations of Lieutenant General Brian Fenton to be the next commander of U.S. Special Operations Command and Lieutenant General Michael Langley to be the next commander of U.S. Africa Command. Thank you for your willingness to lead in these important positions. General Fenton, we welcome your wife Dawn and daughters Nora and Cecilia and parents John and Kathleen. General Langley, we welcome your father Willie and thank him for 25 years of service in the Air Force. We welcome your mother Ola and thank her for her career of service as a postal worker. And we also welcome your sisters Cheryl and Shannon. We are grateful to each of your families for their continued support of your service to the nation. General Fenton, if confirmed, you will take command of U.S. Special Operations Command, or Socom, during an important period of change and transformation. Because of the effects and sacrifice of the Special Operations community and efforts of the Special Operations community over the past 2 decades, the threat from ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and other violent extremist groups have been greatly diminished. However, U.S. national security interests are increasingly challenged by Chinese aggression, Russia's illegal and immoral invasion of Ukraine, and the destabilizing activities of both Iran and North Korea. The persistent engagement of our Special Operations Forces with their Ukrainian counterparts since 2014, and especially in the last few months, has yielded important lessons for how our Special Operations personnel can be employed to support our partners and U.S. national security objectives in the years to come. In particular, many of these lessons apply to our efforts to engage partners and allies in the Indo-Pacific region to counter Chinese aggression. If confirmed, General, I expect your experience commanding both conventional and special operations forces in the Indo-Pacific region will serve you well as we address this pacing threat for the Department of Defense. I hope you will share how you would plan to lead the special operations community to meet this challenge. Finally, as a combatant command with service-like responsibilities, SOCOM needs and deserves a senior civilian to provide service secretary-like oversight and advocacy for our Special Operations Forces. Congress has sought to empower the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Special Operations and Low-Intensity Conflict to fulfill that mandate. General Fenton, if confirmed, I ask for your support as the Department continues to work to fully implement those reforms. General Langley, if confirmed, you will lead U.S. Africa Command, or AFRICOM, at a very critical time. The security situation in East Asia has been on a downward trajectory following the previous administration's decision to withdraw the majority of U.S. military personnel from Somalia in December 2020. Since then, U.S. forces have been conducting periodic engagements to train and advise Somali partners, but U.S. and partner efforts to disrupt and degrade al-Shabaab have not achieved the success we need. I hope you will share your views on the current security situation and the best possible approach to reestablish persistent U.S. military presence with our Somali partners. The situation in West Africa is also increasingly fragile. Over the past 2 years, extremist operations have expanded across the region. While the intelligence community assesses these regional extremist groups are not currently capable of carrying out attacks outside the region, several have professed their intent to do so. Given these challenges, General Langley, I would like to know your views on what can feasibly be accomplished with partner security forces and how we should seek to engage as part of a whole-of-government effort. Both SOCOM and AFRICOM will play important roles in our long-term strategic competition with China and Russia. In the Middle East and Central Asia, Russia continues to leverage hybrid warfare capabilities to expand its own influence and stymie Western security interests. And China has deepened its economic and security ties with Iran. And on the African continent, both Russia and China are looking to expand their security and economic investments and may seek to leverage such access to undermine U.S. influence in critical regions. During today's hearings, I hope you will both discuss your plans to engage with partners and how we can best leverage our competitive advantages to maintain key relationships. Finally, issues related to civilian harm have been a focus for the Armed Services Committee for several years. The U.S. military goes to great lengths to avoid civilian casualties. When tragic errors occur on the battlefield, the United States has an obligation to be transparent, take responsibility, and do everything we can to learn from and prevent future mistakes. I am encouraged by Secretary Austin's personal involvement in these issues, and the priority is placed on them for the department, but more must be done. I look forward to the forthcoming comprehensive Defense Department policy on assessing, investigating, and responding to allegations of civilian casualties, and expect, if confirmed, that each of you will make these issues a priority for your respective commands. Thank you again for your service and willingness to lead in this very challenging time. I certainly look forward to your testimonies. And for the benefit of my colleagues, we would like to move these nominations as quickly as possible, so we will expedite the questions for the record. As you all realize, we're scheduled to adjourn next week for a lengthy period of time, and we'd like to get both these commands in place. With that, let me now recognize the ranking member, Senator Inhofe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thanks to the nominees for being with us today. They've been nominated to oversee commands that are critical to implementing our national defense strategy. Once again, they're coming out. I've always viewed Africa as critical to our national security, which is why I pushed for the creation of AFRICOM. I did start the AFRICOM. We didn't have Africa was a part of 3 different commands at one time, and we changed that, gave them their own command. The only thing we didn't do right was we didn't get the resources in there that they needed. So, despite this, the AFRICOM has never been given the resources that they intended to receive. Our adversaries aren't making the same mistake that we are. I've seen it firsthand during my 168 country visits in the African continent, and understand that DOD is considering plans that would further diminish support to the command, which including merging AFRICOM's Special Operations component with EUCOM and cutting manpower at the Army's component focus. Now, I don't know that this is true, but I've heard from 4 different sources, unrelated, that these plans to downgrade are out there, and it's very important that we understand this, and that we get to the bottom as to what needs to be done there. So let me be clear, I would strongly oppose any such efforts. I would urge my colleagues to do the same. Given the growing strategic importance of Africa to the national security, this would be short-sighted and would be implementing the NDS in Africa much harder. Now, I look to our nominees to describe to us and the American people why it's important the United States stay meaningfully engaged on the continent and back it up with necessary resources. It's long overdue right now. So, General Langley, once you assume your role, I want you to keep in mind that the legacy of AFRICOM, what it is and how far we've come and how much more work needs to be done. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Inhofe. And for the record, I'm informed there are 2 weeks till our recess, but we're still going to expedite this process. I think my summer passions have been aroused prematurely, forgive me. With that, let me recognize General Fenton for your testimony.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, Chairman Reed, Ranking Member Inhofe, distinguished members of the committee. It's an honor to appear before you today as the nominee for the next commander of the United States Special Operations Command. I am very grateful to the President, Secretary Austin, and Chairman Milley for their trust and confidence in me for this nomination. I'd like to recognize and thank the current SOCOM command team, General Rich Clark and Chief Greg Smith, and their wives Suzanne and Tina, for their leadership of the SOCOM force and families these past 3 years. I'm privileged today to be alongside Lieutenant General Mike Langley, an exceptional Marine, officer, leader, and friend. If we're confirmed, I look forward to working closely with him and his future team. I'm also joined today by several people who've been a source of strength and inspiration for me. my wife Dawn, my best friend for 31 years. In every assignment we've had, she's always been a fierce advocate for the men and women of the Joint Force and their families. As the daughter of a World War II veteran, she represents for me all the incredible military families who are the strength of Socom and the Joint Force. Our daughters, Nora and Cecilia. Nora is a consultant here in D.C. and a second lieutenant in the United States Army Reserves. Cecilia just finished her sophomore year in college, is enrolled in Army ROTC, and is currently interning with the FBI. I'm extremely proud of them as they create their own paths of service to this great nation. My parents, John and Kathleen, are from Knoxville, Tennessee. They taught me and my brother Christopher a life of service. Mom was a teacher and a principal for 30 years, and Dad had a long career at the Tennessee Valley Authority. Finally, from Hawaii, my longtime teammate and mentor, retired Command Sergeant Major Joaquin J.C. Cruz. Non-commissioned officers like CSM Cruz and CSM Craig Bishop, my current senior enlisted advisor, represent the center of gravity for the Joint Force and SOCOM. In my estimation, our non-commissioned officers make us the envy of militaries around the world. Serving this nation for 35 years has been the greatest privilege of my life. Much of that service alongside the exceptional men and women, military and civilian, of your Special Operations Forces. Selfless, quiet professionals who work tirelessly here and abroad to keep our nation safe. These men and women truly are SOF's competitive and comparative advantage. They play a pivotal role supporting our combatant commanders and providing this nation with unique asymmetric capabilities. Capabilities needed in this contested world to confront challenges presented by strategic competitors such as China and Russia, to counter persistent threats from terrorist organizations and other malign actors, and if required, provide a range of options for high-end conflict as part of the Joint Force. Special Operations Forces do this as part of an incredible interagency team and invaluable network of partners and allies. As a small percentage of the department's personnel and budget, they provide unequaled return on investment for the nation's defense. SOCOM exists because of this Congress's resolve to ensure the United States has unmatched Special Operations Forces. And you do. And if confirmed, I will work closely with the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Special Operations Low Intensity Conflict, the Chairman, the Secretary of Defense, and this committee to continue recruiting, training, equipping, and caring for these unrivaled SOF professionals and their families. In doing so, I will always provide the President and the Secretary of Defense with candid military advice while being open and transparent with this Congress. I thank this committee once again for your time today, for what you do for our military, SOCOM, and our nation, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you very much, General Fenton. Since the quorum is now present, I ask the committee to consider the list of 3,032 pending military nominations. All of these nominations have been before the committee the right quiet length of time. Is there a motion to favorably report this list of 3,032 pending military nominations to the Senate?
So moved.
Seconds? Second. Thank you. The motion. All in favor say aye. 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 The motion carries. General Langley, please, your statement.
Good morning, Chairman Reed, Ranking Member Inhofe, and distinguished members of this committee. Thank you for the opportunity to appear today. It is a great honor to be the President's nominee to lead U.S. AFRICOM. I am grateful to the trust and confidence extended by him, the Secretary of Defense, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and the Commandant of the Marine Corps. I would also like to recognize the current commander, General Townsend, and his wife, Melissa, for their decades of selfless service to our nation. As many nominees have said in testimony before me, military families form the bedrock upon which our joint force readiness stands. My family is no different. Joining me today from Fort Worth, Texas, are my father, retired U.S. Air Force Master Sergeant Willie C. Langley, and my stepmother, Ola Langley, who I affectionately refer to as Two Mama. My father dedicated 25 years to the defense of our nation, and my stepmother is a retired frontline supervisor at our U.S. Post Office. I'm also accompanied by my sister Sharon from Poughkeepsie, New York, and my sister Cheryl from Keller, Texas. My family is a personal example, and continual encouragement have been a constant source of strength for me. Without their support, I would not be here today. I would also like to take a moment to recognize my colleague, Lieutenant Brian Fenton, and his wife, Dawn. Simply put, there is no better choice to lead the service members and families of U.S. Special Operations Command. If confirmed, I look forward to working with a professional of his caliber to address the challenges and opportunities in Africa. Now, the global security environment we're witnessing today is the most challenging I've seen throughout my 37 years. The 53 nations within U.S. AFRICOM area of responsibility are not immune from the systemic effects of ongoing global tensions, and there are many additional trans-regional struggles unique to the continent. These challenges cannot be solved by military power alone. They require integration of diplomatic efforts from the Department of State, development endeavors from USAID, and comprehensive strategies from other allies and partners operating in Africa. If confirmed, I will work with these stakeholders in pursuit of common goals. The command will continue to address the dual challenges of strategic competition and violent extremism. The People's Republic of China and the Russian Federation continue to expand their access and influence across the continent. Simultaneously, organizations such as Al-Shabaab, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and JNIM expand their reach and threaten American citizens and our interests. If confirmed, I will campaign to address these issues and work with fellow combatant commanders to ensure our plans are integrated across the globe. I pledge to be forthright with this committee in regards to resourcing our strategies and articulate to you the attendant risk. I am enthusiastic to engage across the whole government to faithfully execute the policies and orders of the President and the Secretary of Defense, while being transparent with timely to this body and other oversight committees regarding the resources and posture required to do so. Chairman Reed, Ranking Member Inhofe, distinguished members of this committee, it is an honor to sit before you today, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Well, thank you very much, General Langley and General Fenton. Before we begin the questioning, I have a series of standard questions which all nominees must address. You may respond in unison. Have you adhered to applicable laws and regulations governing conflicts of interest?
I have.
Thank you. Have you assumed any duties or taken any actions that would appear to presume the outcome of the confirmation process?
No.
No, Senator.
No, Senator.
Exercising our legislative and oversight responsibilities makes it important that this committee, its subcommittees, and other appropriate committees of Congress receive testimony, briefings, reports, records, and other information from the executive branch on a timely basis. Do you agree, if confirmed, to appear and testify before this committee when requested?
I will, Senator. Yes, Senator.
Thank you. Do you agree, when asked before this committee, to give your personal views, even if your views differ from the administration?
Yes, Senator.
Yes, Senator.
Do you agree to provide records, documents, and electronic communications in a timely manner when requested by this committee, its subcommittees, or other appropriate committees of Congress, and to consult with the requester regarding the basis for any good faith delay or denial in providing such records?
Yes, Senator.
Yes, Senator.
Will you ensure that your staff complies with deadlines established by this committee for the production of reports, records, and other information, including timely responding to hearing questions for the record?
Yes, Senator.
Yes, Senator.
Will you cooperate in providing witnesses and briefers in response to congressional requests?
Yes, Senator.
Yes, Senator.
Will those witnesses and briefers be protected from reprisal for their testimony or briefings?
Yes, Senator.
Yes, Senator.
Thank you very much. And now let me proceed to my questions. First of all, General Lang, let me thank you for your thoughtful opening statement, and we all concur, along with General Fenton, that your families are probably the reason you're here and the reason you'll do a superb job in place. Lieutenant General Langley, you've had experience in Somalia in various periods of your career. As a tactical level, as a young captain, you deployed in support of the peacekeeping forces in 1992, and at the operations and strategic level as the commander of Marine Forces Africa. As we start reintroducing our forces into Somalia and rebuild our advisory relationships, can you give us an idea of how your experience will help inform your views?
Yes, Senator. I know what's most effective, just from my experience, whether in Afghanistan doing partnership and capacity with the DSF, or as you said, Senator, all the way back to 1992 when we went for Restore Hope, and we had to engage with multiple countries that came in to assist Somalia at that time. It takes a whole government approach, but at the tactical level, to build partnership capacity resonates. There's assurance actions that happen by our military forces and our allies sticks. We build capital, and it's the best thing that will thwart the great power competition that's coming with these false value propositions and offerings across the continent of Africa. I think we get it. We get it by, with, and through. We get it with a whole government approach. And within the Department of Defense, we have a lot of mechanisms in which we can to build on that capital, whether it be through the state partnership program or whether it be through USAID doing development or IMET programs for education and training of those that have like-minded and the same values that we have here in the United States. That's effective, Chairman, and I think it is effective today.
Well, thank you very much, General Langley. General Fenton, as I mentioned in my opening statement, we have, over the last several years, been trying to establish a relationship where the ASD Solik is the service-like secretary for Socom. We think Socom needs a civilian voice the same way other elements in the Defense Department do. And what is your thought about this, and are you prepared to work closely with the Solik to accomplish this objective?
Senator, I am prepared to work closely with ASD Solik if confirmed in this role. And the civilian oversight and advocacy that ASD Solik, in this case Secretary Mayer, provides is critical. In the service-like secretary role, a voice for, as I understand it from my perspective, but have seen it, for the man, train, and equip pieces of SOCOM that are so vitally important. Also an opportunity to be an advocate into the department and to this Congress on behalf of SOCOM. Makes us a better team, and I'm committed to that relationship.
Thank you very much, General. And General Langley, one of the areas you outlined in your testimony was the Gulf of Guinea, incidents of piracy and illegal, unregulated fishing. AFRICOM has been working closely with the Coast Guard to build maritime security awareness. What are your thoughts about the maritime security challenges in Africa?
Chairman, there are many, but a lot of these issues were addressed this week. Chairman, when I had MARFORAP in 20 and 21, most of my efforts from that position was to get the Naval Infantry Leaders Conference going. Of course, we were covered with COVID, so we had to do it virtually. But I engaged with Admiral Wadi out of Senegal, and we had to push it off. But yesterday they made it. 2 weeks ago they made it a reality. We had many countries there. We had 17 African countries, Chairman, 27. Brazil was there, and also as we were there, and we had 7 European countries. So maritime domain, as we see China trying to encroach upon Equatorial Guinea and across that channel writ large, these countries stated a vision. The maritime exclusion zones a lot of African countries don't have the propensity to go out that far, but I think working with other countries, I think we set the bar, and that's going to be the biggest deterrent or assurance actions, as I mentioned, that's going to deter China from trying to take over the west coast of the African continent.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for your foresight as the Marine Corps commander in Africa. I appreciate that very much. Just quickly, General Fenton, I mentioned in my opening remarks the issue of casualties. This has a particular impact in terms of Special Forces operations because many times your operatives have to make instantaneous decisions with limited information. Any sort of sense that you have of what you can do to improve the transparency reporting to the Department of Defense?
Chairman, thank you for that. First, I would start with it is a moral and strategic imperative for your special ops forces and for our military to avoid civilian casualties. Currently, having incorporated Secretary's guidance, refined our tactics, techniques, and procedures, Secretary Austin's guidance, we are now aligned with and in concert with the effort inside the department on the civilian harm mitigation and response action plan. And certainly, as that goes forward, adding our intellectual energy and expertise to that. I would just end with, we take it as a moral and strategic obligation, Senator, to avoid civilian casualties and do all that we can, even in the friction and fog of war.
Thank you very much. Senator Inhofe, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I mentioned in my opening statement, and to both of you in my office, that I understand DoD is considering plans that would downgrade support to AFRICOM, and I'm still kind of pursuing this and seeing the nature of this downgrade that is rumored. Let me say again that I would strongly oppose this. AFRICOM needs more resources, not less. So I'd ask both of you to respond that, if confirmed, will you both commit to assess DoD's resourcing plans for AFRICOM and make sure that it has the support that it needs?
Senator, I will.
Yes, Senator.
And will you report back to this committee on those efforts?
Senator, I will.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
In Western Sahara, General Langley, as I mentioned in my office, I'm deeply concerned about the plight of the people of Western Sahara. For more than 5 decades, the Sahrawi people have been subjected to repeated broken promises and vicious attacks by the Moroccan government. Morocco has done nothing to repair the damage that they've done to the Sahrawi people after all these years, and they've done nothing to show they're serious about resolving the crisis. Instead, they've misled multiple American administrations on their willingness to negotiate, I'd say unwillingness to negotiate, a mutually agreeable outcome to that issue. And that's why I've spoken to Senator Rounds and other members of this committee on this issue, and why I have pushed DoD to look at the alternative locations for the annual African Lion military exercise that's been hosted in Morocco previously. And I'm pleased that Secretary Austin is in agreement with me on this issue, and so I'd ask each one of you to respond as to whether or not you are also in agreement.
Yes, Senator.
Yes, Senator.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Inhofe. Now let me recognize Senator King, please.
General Langley, thank you very much. I'm going to begin my questioning with an unconventional suggestion. I would suggest that you plan before deploying, assuming you're confirmed, to spend several hours with Senator Inhofe. There is no member of the United States Congress who knows as much about the people and politics of Africa as Senator Inhofe does, and he's a wealth of knowledge and information, and I think it would be very profitable for you to take up partake of his wisdom and experience. I hope you will do so.
Yes, Senator.
General Langley, I'm concerned that in the current world situation, we're taking our eye off the terrorist threat. And it is certainly extremely serious in Africa. Al-Shabaab, Boko Haram, Al-Qaeda. Please share with me your thoughts on that, because it's so easy in the time of Ukraine and the China challenge to sort of move the focus away from terrorism, but these people are still there. They're still hostile to this country, and I think they're still a threat to this country.
Senator, I fully concur with that assessment. As Martha Raff, leaving there in late 21, it was already a concern. The atmospherics on the ground, as you look in the east, Al-Shabaab was really starting to take control. Anasom was incapable of holding. Matter of fact, they regressed. But the most focus we should put on is the metastasizing of the spread across the Sahel and also into the Lake Chad region. Other elements, Boko Haram was taken by some of the ISIS units that spring down from North Africa. And then we have JNAM as well. So it is more of a problem today. That's my anecdotal assessment, but I am privy to this because in my current job, fourth generation of these units, whether it be fast teams or whether it be the MUs that are generated out of the East Coast. We have to address this, and we have to train to those standards of combat and violent extremist organization. So, sir, it is a concern, Senator, and we need to be able to address it through a whole government approach, but also a whole allies approach in the partnership in these various regions.
Well, I think part of your role is going to be to continue to sound the alarm, to not allow the focus of the Defense Department or the administration to completely ignore this threat, and you're going to be on the front lines of confronting it and understanding it. So I hope you'll be noisy about the threat that you see. Mali is an example where the military coup has sort of opened the way for the Russians, also to some extent to terrorist organizations. I was aware of the Chinese efforts in various parts of Africa, but Russia is taking a very active role as well. Isn't that correct?
Senator is correct. The Wagner Group, they have ill intentions. Their methods is more political military, but issuing weapons or selling of weapons, it just brings on fragility, especially across fragile countries. So that's why we still, although capital, we are still the partner of choice. So if confirmed, we will re-engage, we will reset, as General Townsend's already re-looking at West Africa at this time.
Finally, my impression from working with prior AFRICOM commanders is that the AFRICOM commander has an important de facto diplomatic role in terms of dealing with these countries, representing the United States, not in substitution for the Department of State, but in addition to. And on that line, I believe that one of our most valuable programs in terms of return on investment is the military training program, the program whereby we bring officers from other countries here and also do training abroad, it enables us to inculcate our values to some extent, but also the skills and knowledge that we have to work with these younger officers who may well turn out to be the leaders of their countries.
Absolutely, sir. I concur. I mean, across my 37 years in the Marine Corps and going to various schools from TBS to Amphibious Warfare School all the way to the Army War College and Navy War College, we had our partners there from various countries. And a lot of them, if you do the statistics, a number of them went to U.S. schools and ended up being chiefs of defense or ministries of defense.
Thank you, General. Thank you, General Fenton. I look forward to working with both of you. Congratulations on your appointments. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator King. Let me recognize Senator Fisher, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here with us today. General Fenton, what do you think are the most significant challenges to carry out counterterrorism missions in Afghanistan, and how do you think Socom can best approach those challenges?
Senator, first of all, thank you for the session the other day. I appreciated your time. I think the challenge is, as has been discussed previously with General Kurilla in his testimony, is the access into Afghanistan. My perspective, as I shared with you, Senator, earlier, is that is a challenge, and it is harder, but is absolutely doable there. And if we think about greater issues of over-the-horizon counterterrorism ops, it is absolutely doable for the Socom team. The challenges are based on the environment, could be based on distance, and then in many ways are addressed via the number of intelligence disciplines, partners and allies, and the interagency team. And the SOF team is one part of addressing that challenge, certainly along with the CENTCOM team, as we address sensing, illuminating, and making sure that the ISIS threat in Afghanistan does not present a challenge to the homeland.
Would you agree with the current Socom commander, General Clark, that without sustained CT pressure, which I do not believe we are seeing currently, we're going to continue to see terrorist groups that are more able to focus on planning and preparing for external attacks?
Senator, I would agree with that. Aligned with the national defense strategy that as China is the pacing challenge and Russia is the acute threat, it tells us to still account for persistent threats of counterterrorism, VEOs, and other malign actors, Iran and North Korea. So my perspective is absolutely we have to keep the pressure on, account for that is a threat to the homeland, and do it via all the means we have available in, should I be confirmed, in Socom, with interagency partners, our whole of government, and partners and allies that we've developed during our last 20 years and certainly will carry forward.
In light of the priorities that are laid out in the NDS, how is Socom balancing its investments to operate against near-peer competitors like China and Russia with efforts to fulfill its global counterterrorism requirements? And just how much risk are you willing to accept?
Well, Senator, in my current position, I'm not sure I have the fullest insights of how Socom is doing that accountability, and if confirmed, I certainly would have that discussion with the Socom team, the combatant commands, interagency. But I can tell you from a previous experience, my time in Indo-PACOM as Special Operations Command, Pacific Commander, I was competing in that theater with the Chinese in terms of relationships, military engagements, and at a point, we were the force, and we are, as I still understand, the force of choice. The SOF team is the force of choice out there.
Right.
While the CT fight was going on in Syria. So I think that we must account for CT, as I mentioned, per the NDS, and we can, with a whole of interagency and partners and allies team, while addressing the China-Russia challenge through the COCOMs with asymmetric options and multiple dilemmas for China and Russia.
With your experience in Indo-PACOM, I think you would be a good resource to answer this question. Do you anticipate the need to realign or rebalance special operation forces to better support that region?
Senator, if confirmed, I'd like to take a deeper look into that through the Socom enterprise. My recognition from time in Indo-PACOM, 5.5 years, is that we were competing then while we did the counterterrorism mission there and globally. But my sense is I'd have to look at that through the Socom lens.
Okay. And what capability areas do you believe should Socom be able to focus its investments over the next 3 years so that we really can increase its relevance, but also its effectiveness when we look at these near-peer competitors, when we look at being in Indo-Pacific and increasing our presence there while also being able to maintain the needs we have for Socom across many areas, especially now with folks on Russia again?
Senator, I would start with capabilities that will enable us and advantage us in contested environments that I sense and I see right now will be part of the environment as we go forward. Those they may look like manned and unmanned systems, artificial intelligence, and certainly leveraging technology to give us an advantage. But if confirmed, I would like to look at that more fully through the Socom team.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Fisher. Senator Shaheen, please.
Thank you. Congratulations to both of you and your families on your nominations, and thank you for your willingness to continue to serve this country. I want to start with a question for both of you, because as we've seen in Ukraine, information warfare has become more and more an aspect of modern conflict, and I think we're not doing as good a job as we need to do in order to compete with Russia and China in this new world. So can you talk about what could be done to make it easier on the ground for special operations forces, for forces in Africa to be part of that information warfare, and how you see policymakers and the State Department, other actors in the information warfare space, being able to better coordinate with you all as commanders to respond to the challenges that we're seeing? General Fenton, you want to go first?
Senator, thank you. Yes, I'll start. Information operations is a domain that we absolutely have to be a part of. It's extremely key in terms of understanding an environment, shaping an environment, amplifying voices in an environment, and certainly taking on misinformation and disinformation. From my experience and in my current position, that has been key terrain for us to be a part of. My sense, as I have experienced this through many years, is the speed of relevance continues to be a challenge. Getting it in a timely manner to the proper audiences to have certainly the intended outcomes, that would come first to mind for me. But having limited visibility in the entirety of the Socom team, I would like to take that and certainly have a discussion with the Socom interagency teammates and come back to you through the Department Center.
Thank you. I look forward to that. General Langley?
Senator, I agree with my esteemed colleague. Information in today's characterization of competition or even conflict, information is ubiquitous. Given that, our adversaries are putting out malign and disinformation, and that they do that at what General Fenton said. They do it at the speed of relevance. Across our department, we're looking at ways how we can speed that up so commanders can have on the ground information and be able to respond. When I was in CENTCOM, the CENTCOM commander always pushed me as the J5 that had some of the MISO or the information across the networks that were at our disposal to counter what the adversaries were trying to do to us, and we had to operate at the speed of relevance. So we had to engage the Department of Defense and try to increase our authorities for, as you say, Senator, the service man or woman on the ground that needs that information.
Thank you. General Langley, Senator King talked about how often the head of AFRICOM is also a diplomat in Africa, and especially as we look at China's expansionist efforts across the continent of Africa, where they are making investments that are really a threat to our assets and security there. Can you talk about how you see AFRICOM being able to work to use soft power to help influence what happens on the ground in Africa? Things like humanitarian relief and support for our regional partners?
Yes, Senator. I see, as Marford Raff, as I worked with the J5 at AFRICOM, because General Townsend tasked all the components to get together and come up with a theater campaign plan that put together all the efforts of a whole government approach. As USAID, as we look at the Fragility Act of 2019 and start to implement that, as we look at Prosper Africa, where that program with already 17 departments and agencies across the U.S. Gov are willing to help, and also to thwart some of the Belt and Road initiatives of the Digital 3. So all collectively, in aggregation, those programs will be enough to counter great power competition.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Sheen. Senator Cotton, please.
Gentlemen, thank you for your career of service, and thank you for answering the call of duty one more. Thank you to your families for their support over these many years. General Fenton, what do you see as the Special Operation Force's role in countering China?
Senator, from my perspective of 5.5 years in Indo-PACOM, seeing it through the eyes of the Army component, Special Ops component, and as the Deputy Commander component, I would start with the role is, in concert with the COCOMs, developing asymmetric, scalable options for the COCOMs via our special operators' placement, access, and influence, presenting multiple dilemmas to the Chinese in this case, in Indo-PACOM, and also developing and strengthening the partner and ally piece that's a comparative and competitive advantage for this nation.
Okay. I think probably most Americans, if they're not familiar with the military or haven't served in it or know those who do, they think of Special Operations Forces and what they saw in movies like Black Hawk Down or Zero Dark 30. I assume that's not what it would look like, or Special Operations roles countering a major nation state like China would not look like those kinds of missions. Is that correct?
Senator, they would look like small teams in countries throughout the region, in concert certainly with the Indo-PACOM commander's direction and in concert with Special Operations Command Pacific that speak the language, are culturally attuned, have been aligned against that region for many years, and actually in many ways have grown up in the formations of those partner nations, developing, train, advise, and assist plans, training, advising, and assisting, presenting options both to the country and to the Indo-PACOM commander, and dilemmas for China, all the while also being ready to present options in the event that the joint force required them full range if there was conflict.
Right now we have a war going on between two nation states, Russia and Ukraine. What lessons do you think we can take away about the role of special operations from that conflict?
Well, Senator, from my current position, these are the roles I certainly have taken away. I think first it's the investment early. In 2014 in Ukraine, the training with the Special Operations element in concert with the EUCOM commander's direction, train, advise, and assist, training on resistance, training on unconventional warfare, investments in technology that I think have are now being seen in the asymmetric, atypical way Ukraine is blunting the Russian invasion. The second would be the power of partners and allies. What we see with NATO, the galvanizing of that and others that have come in a very close way to provide, whether it be military assistance, train, advise, and assistance, and entirety in the world show an aggressor what the international rules-based order will not tolerate. Those would invest early, the partner of power and allies, and then I would close, Senator, with what a combat credible force looks like. These forces that are there have seen combat. U.S., the forces we have trained as SOF that are actually in Ukraine now, the other nations, they've had combat. And I think it's easy for some nations to look and just train and believe that they know what it is to be in combat. It's one thing to practice, it's another thing to have been in the game. And the U.S. and the partners have been in the game.
All right, thank you. I want to ask you a question about recruiting. I know it's not exactly in your lane, but obviously you just talked about the health and credibility of the force. I'm very concerned about the recruiting shortfalls in the military, in particular in the Army, and the lowering of standards for new potential recruits. Can you commit to within your power in this new role to not lowering recruiting and accession standards for our special operations forces?
Senator, I'll start. The special operations community comes in to special operations for those standards. They, in many ways, exceed and push us on those. That force has shown incredible outcomes over the last 20 years and well before. I can commit to you to maintain those standards for sure, to keep the force that has done this great work, not only 20 years but before, ready for the challenges ahead.
Good, thank you. I mean, I think this committee is going to need to look into this matter. I think some of the decisions, for example, that the Army has made, about temporarily saying they were going to suspend the GED requirement or letting people with face and neck tattoos come in the Army when they're not letting, Captain America, who's the quarterback of his football team but got a concussion or got his knee torn up but went on to play 2 more all-state seasons. It's just absurd, and it deserves some real oversight here. One question for you, General Langley. Djibouti, we have a very important base there, not just for counterterrorism purposes, but it sits at the mouth of the Bab el-Mandeb Straits, one of the key choke points of the world. Lo and behold, the Chinese just opened up a base down the street. What's your understanding of their current capabilities at that base and why they have it there?
Senator, they have it there because probably in the future they want to have the ability to be able to affect free flow of commerce that affects our global economy. That's a strategic choke point that needs to remain free for freedom of navigation of commerce. That is a strategic point that we need to be really concerned about.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Cotton. Senator Blumenthal, please.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thank you both for your service to our country, and thank you to your families as well. I recently visited with President Zelensky in Ukraine just about 2 weeks ago to the day, as well as his top military leadership. I came back convinced that Ukraine can win this fight. When I say win, I mean push back the Russians in their brutal, inhumane assault on the people of Ukraine. Their fighters are fierce, relentless, and driven to win this fight, even in taking back some of the occupied territory. To do so, they are going to have to mount an insurgency campaign involving special operations, and their fighters really need the kind of training that our special operators can provide. Would you agree with me, Lieutenant General Fenton, that our special operators have a role to play in training the Ukrainian military in that kind of insurgent special operations that can be done behind the lines against the Russians?
Senator, I would agree that that type of training is the hallmark of your special operations team. We were in the 1950s born for this type of work and have carried it forward even during the VEO fight of the last 20 years. unconventional warfare, foreign internal defense, missions like that are the hallmark of training that your special ops team knows very well. Has also, since 2014 and before the invasion, been able to do with the Ukrainians in a very robust way, and is doing outside now as we still continue to train along with certainly the greater UCOM team.
I think that training is very important, and it is being done outside the country, as you point out quite correctly and importantly, not within Ukraine, which is important to keep the boundaries on our involvement and the risks that we incur there. But I hope that our role will be increasingly robust in training those Ukrainian fighters who can do that kind of unconventional warfare against the Russians, because I think in the long term it will be critical, along with our additional military aid, whether it's artillery or air defense and humanitarian assistance and stronger economic sanctions. I'd like to ask you both about the Wagner Group and other private military companies which pose a threat in Ukraine as well as elsewhere. As you know, they are often funded by Russian oligarchs, principally Yevgeny Prigozhin, I think has been identified as one of them. They are responsible for some of the atrocities that have been committed in Ukraine, perhaps in Africa as well. Perhaps beginning with you, General Fenton, could you comment on the threat that these private military companies like the Wagner Group pose to American interests?
Senator, the Wagner Group and groups like that receive certainly Russian money and oversight and direction, proxies of the Russians. They spread Russian aggression. They are ill-disciplined. They go into countries, in my experience, as I've seen them, and actually do them harm. As the Russians, they are acute threats, as we've seen them in Africa and certainly in Ukraine, ill-trained, ill-disciplined, and frankly, in many ways, a picture of what the Russians would like to use and in their way of warfare that, as proxies, usually ends up extremely hurtful to a country that I've seen them in, and in many ways an effort by the Russians to expand their influence that is in need of us sensing, illuminating, and ensuring we keep our eye on.
Pretty vicious and brutal.
Vicious and brutal.
General Langley?
Senator, the Wagner Group, they exacerbate instability, especially with developing countries, and they stoke conflict. And on the continent of Africa, from my professional viewpoint, that just spells trouble for the overall stability and security across the continent.
My time has expired. I thank you both for your very informative answers. I look forward to supporting you strongly. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Blumenthal. Senator Rounds, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to both of you for your service to our country and to your families for their solid support as well. General Fenton, thank you for meeting with me yesterday. I would like to echo Senator Inhofe's concerns regarding the potential combination of UCOM and AFRICOM TSOCs. I do believe that this would result in a situation where, once again, AFRICOM would come up short at a time in which our near-peer adversaries will be putting more assets in, and we're going to find ourselves in a very uncomfortable position. And thank you for your commitment to follow up on that and to let us know what your thoughts are. General Langley, thank you also for meeting with me, and once again for your recognition of the concerns about the lack of assets sometimes within AFRICOM, and the fact that we cannot take our eyes off of an entire continent simply because we have refocused on near-peer competition elsewhere in the world. So I thank you for that conversation, and I do look forward to working with both of you. General Langley, like Senator Inhofe, I would also like to highlight my concern for the people of the Western Sahara and the absence of a mutually acceptable resolution to this issue after all of these years. While it will take a whole-of-government approach to address the issue, AFRICOM has an important role, particularly with regard to our military relationships in the region. I look forward to your assessment of this issue and continued dialogue with you. This could be a powder keg, and with other outside interests priming the pump, should we not get this issue resolved, it could be another one of those hot spots that simply does not go away, and a little bit of attention right now may go a long way, sir. And I know that we talked about it in the office, but I would like your thoughts and commitment that you will follow up with regard to the Western Sahara situation.
Senator, I will follow up on this serious issue. I know that the Department of Defense is looking at it, and I think it's time to see if Morocco has made any progress.
Thank you, sir. General Fenton, I also share Senator King's concerns about making sure that we retain the right balance of forces in order to execute counterterrorism operations. We cannot assume the risk of doing so via over-the-horizon capabilities only. What are your thoughts on this issue and the fair balance or recognition that the over-the-horizon capabilities, while great, they are not a replacement for other types that we currently have in place?
Senator, with regard to the balance of counterterrorism activities and the pacing challenge of China and the acute threat of Russia, I start with the National Defense Strategy and the guides from the Department. The focus is China has a pacing challenge based on its growing military capability, its economic capability, and its desires to displace the U.S. In the international rules-based order as the focus, followed by Russia as the acute threat. In that sense, the counterterrorism mission and VEOs that still threaten the homeland, we address a number of ways. The Special Operations Team is currently very focused on that mission, while it's also competing with China and Russia. We're part of an interagency team and whole-of-government team that does the counterterrorism mission. And I think when we add the partners and allies in there, Senator, my sense is as we go forward to the future, we'll work to an enduring, sustainable counterterrorism posture that is sensing, illuminating, and preventing threats to the homeland as we address China and Russia as the primary focuses for the department. On the over-the-horizon CTE question, it is challenging, depending on the location, geographic environment, but is absolutely doable. Secretary Austin has said we can sense, illuminate, and take action. Could be a kinetic strike. It could be a raid anywhere in the world. We also have, over the years, developed fusion cells and partners that look at this effort and take action. Law enforcement action, fiscal action, to degrade and disrupt these terror networks. So my sense is, Senator, on the balance question, again, we have done it, we can do it, and we must do it as we go forward in the future. CT, vice the pacing challenge of China and the acute threat of Russia.
Thank you, sir. And thank you to both of you for your service. And once again, I do look forward to supporting both of you in your nominations. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
All right, thank you very much, Senator Rounds. Senator Kane, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to both of our nominees, my best to you. You're wonderful public servants. You'll do good work in these roles. I appreciate your sacrifice of your families. General Fenton, I want to follow up on an item that Senator Cotton was talking to you about, which was sort of recruitment. We have had a lot of testimony in this committee, most recently in May from General McConville, about recruiting challenges faced by each of our services. There's about 32 million Americans aged 17 to 24 today. 9 million of those meet initial entry requirements. but less than 500,000 also meet the academic and lifestyle criteria. So even after these reductions, the potential recruiting pool is one where the military's got to compete with private sector and other, institutions, companies that are really hungry for good talent. Special operations community has its own set of standards. Senator Cotton was trying to get your assurance that those would not be degraded, but I was actually more interested in what is the current kind of recruiting issues on the special operations side. Are we doing pretty well, or do we have challenges? And talk a little bit about that with the committee, if you would.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you for that. I'll start certainly the understanding that all, as you've outlined, our services are having a recruiting challenge. Numbers of factors play into that that I'm sure here are all familiar with. If confirmed, Socom is a recipient of Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine teammates, a grateful recipient as they come into our pipelines. What I would like to do is, if confirmed, examine with the Socom team. First, how are we doing in recruiting? From my current position, Senator, and I certainly have a very mature force, we're not having some of the challenges that I hear about. But at the greater Socom level, my sense is I need to understand if we are, and frankly, if we have best business practices, things that we have inside the formation that can assist the services, that we could trade back and forth as they have best business practices as well, for all of us to help in this challenge. We would want young men and women who want to serve and meet the standards, either in initial recruitment and certainly in the special ops community, to be here with us. And if there are things in the Socom enterprise, again, I'm not fully informed on all of those, and if confirmed, I would look into it, that we are doing well, I'd like to share those. And if there are things the services are doing well, I certainly would like to absorb those. This is a team sport about bringing in the national treasure, the men and women of this country, that want to serve and can meet our standards to be part of our formation.
General Fenton, one thing I'll encourage you on is that Socom has traditionally been significantly less diverse than the military as a whole, and that may speak to recruiting issues and communities that haven't necessarily been connected with Socom, aren't really aware of opportunities in Socom. So there may be affirmative ways to get information out to communities that haven't traditionally been represented that will drum up more interest and excitement about serving in this particular branch of the military, and I would encourage you in that way. General Langley, I want to circle back to questions that have been asked about sort of Russia in Africa. So one of my colleagues asked about the Wagner Group. The French are pulling their military out of Mali, and that's going to leave a vacuum. Now, some of the French forces that are coming out of Mali will go into Niger, where they will be able to work in tandem with the U.S., so that's not all bad for U.S. forces. But when vacuums are left, then bad actors fill the vacuums, and we're seeing that in Mali. I'm also on the Foreign Relations Committee and have been doing a lot of work in the diplomacy surrounding Russia's war in Ukraine. And one of the things that we notice is recently, June 3rd, the African Union president, who's also the president of Senegal, met with Vladimir Putin and then came out of the meeting criticizing U.S. sanctions for creating hunger issues, in Africa. It's not U.S. sanctions that are creating hunger issues. It's an illegal war against a country that's been a breadbasket for African countries. And so when we see African nations kind of adopting the Russian disinformation line, and we see groups like the Wagner Group coming in to fill vacuums left by others, it causes some significant concern. I think it was Senator King that pointed out that the AFRICOM commander is also a bit of a diplomat, and so I think there's significant work to be done in telling the right story about this illegal invasion of Ukraine and sharing how that is creating real misery and hunger in Africa. And it pains me to see African leaders sort of accepting Russian disinformation about what's causing this kind of epidemic of hunger in Africa rather than recognizing that this illegal invasion is. So just if you would, in my last 30, actually, I'm already over time, maybe I should just say I would love it if you would just really commit to being that kind of diplomat that might help the U.S. do a better job in winning the narrative war. We don't have to spin anybody. It's just a matter of, making the truth more persuasive than disinformation.
Senator, I concur, and if confirmed, that's would be my top priorities.
Excellent. Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Kane. Senator Ernst, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. General Fenton and General Langley, thank you very much for your service and for the service and support of your family members as well. And as they are closing out their time in command, my best wishes as well to General and Suzanne Clark and General and Melissa Townsend. I look forward to having a good discussion with you this morning. We've heard a lot of interesting comments and thoughts coming from both of you. So, General Langley, I'll start with you, please, sir. Violent extremist organizations like Al-Qaeda and ISIS and their offshoots are really spreading through the continent of Africa and really making their presence known within your region. And General Townsend had said a while back that al-Shabaab is, quote, the largest and most kinetically active al-Qaeda network in the world, end quote. So what would be your policy towards countering and containing these various VEO groups? And how do we protect then our U.S. interests in the region?
Senator, that's going to be my top priority, addressing this. As we look at, I concur that al-Shabaab has increased capacity, and it really this is the first ranking as far as affecting U.S. interests and U.S. people. So they have aspirations for external operations, transnational operations. So that is going to be a segue into, if confirmed, I will need, as General Townsend asked, more ISR. ISR is an active deterrent. ISR is the commander's sense to make sense, and it underpins all activities. So, Senator, that's just some of the assets and collectively that we will need to be able to deter and keep al-Shabaab from metastasizing anymore.
Thank you, sir. And I hope as a committee we're able to support those needs with those resources as well. One other area I'm interested in is the substantial amount of strategic and critical mineral reserves that are found in the continent, and how can the United States leverage our military alliances as well as whole of government in the region to access these minerals?
Senator, I'm apprised of that, of what our competitors are trying to do. There are coercive tactics of coming in and encroaching upon the continent of Africa for minerals or rare earth minerals such as cobalt. That's probably going to be the oil of the future. They recognize that, but by their predatory means of getting it, it's going to take a whole government approach. It's going to have to take a whole alliance approach to illuminate them and talk to our partners, engage with our partners to ensure that we are the partner of choice and that they're being clearly exploited.
Thank you. Absolutely. We want to be that partner of choice. And General Fenton as well, something that we have discussed and I've discussed with many former commanders of Socom is the preservation of the force and family. And I know that you are a firm supporter of this as well. That first soft truth that humans are more important than hardware is very important to all of us. So, sir, how will you continue to ensure the growth of the POTFF program?
Senator, to start, thank you for the meeting the other day. I really appreciated the opportunity to chat about this. And I'll also add thank you for your support of this program, this committee's support of this program. The POTFF program is an extremely important part of the Socom fabric. This ability to look at our service members and their families through the physical, the psychological, the cognitive and the spiritual domains, and address not only the challenges in the profession that we're in, but the personal and also just the life challenges that come at each and every one of us every day. If confirmed, I would want to take what General Clark and the team have done those 3 years even further, certainly through ensuring that folks in our formation understand it's there, look at challenges that may exist with regard to access, and maybe even understanding the metrics and the data behind the program. But I will offer, Senator, as you know, it is critical to this formation. In a performance-based organization, this program is a performance-based program that, when added to the service programs and others that wrap around it, address the whole dimension of the person. And as you mentioned, human is more important than hardware. And in my current position, and the history is indicative of where I may go if confirmed as SOCOM, people are the number one priority, our competitive and comparative advantage, and that hits it right at the heart of that. Thank you, Senator.
Absolutely. And gentlemen, thank you so very much for your time and your continuing service to our great United States of America, and I look forward to supporting both of you in your confirmation process.
Thank you very much, Senator Ernst. Senator Peters, are you prepared?
I am, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Peters, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and great to see the three of you here, or the two of you here. Thank you for your service to our country. General Fenton, other combatant commanders have shared with me their concerns that training opportunities with partner nations can suffer due to a lack of host nation training space or high-range usage at some of our major U.S. installations. As SOCOM is fundamentally integrated with our partners, requires a wide range of training capabilities, and often operates in clandestine environments. My question for you is, do you think increasing SOCOM's use of National Guard training centers, many of which are well-equipped yet are currently underutilized, can improve mission readiness for the special operations community as well as our foreign partners?
Senator, thank you for that question, and I'll start with thanking the National Guard and the National Guard teams I've been associated with for many years. My first Special Forces deployment was with 20th Special Forces Group, National Guard, and I've been associated with 19th and 20th groups in the Special Ops community really ever since, and been with them on missions, and watched the incredible work that they do, and we're very grateful. I would also add that during my time in Indo-PACOM, in many positions, but certainly as the deputy commander, I saw the power of the National Guard relationships and countries throughout the region through the lens of the State Partnership Program. Extremely impactful as we watched our National Guard teammates not only have a very strong relationship, but grow up with many of those forces and in a way that strengthened the bonds of partners and allies. So very, very grateful to the entire National Guard team and to what I saw in action. Senator, to your training area question, if confirmed, I would like to take a deeper look into that from the SOCOM side to ensure that I have the most fulsome answer, and I'm not missing any details. But I would like to take a look at that if confirmed.
Great. Well, I'd appreciate that, General. General, another question for you. India is certainly a very vital partner for us in maintaining a free and open Indo-Pacific. I think it's absolutely essential that democracies like India and the United States work together to combat the global spread of authoritarianism emanating from countries like China. My question for you is, assuming you share this worldview, which I believe you do, how will that philosophy guide your efforts to bolster SOCOM's relationship with the Indian military?
Senator, I do share the view that India is an important partner. My time in Indo-PACOM under Admirals Harris and Admiral Davidson, it was their focus. A partnership, a strengthening of bonds, not only for my time in the Special Ops community there in Indo-Pacific, but across all the components. I had 4 to 5 visits to India and many visits with Indian counterparts in Hawaii and throughout the region. I think it's a critical partnership from what I knew then, and my sense is it still is now. If confirmed, I would want to consult with Admiral Aquilino, the Indo-PACOM commander, and the current Special Ops Command Pacific commander to give you a more fulsome answer to how we go forward as the Socom team. But I share your view that India as a critical partner.
Great. Thank you, General. General Langley, in your written response to the committee, you identified, quote, backsliding democracies and weak regimes as some of the most difficult challenges facing AFRICOM. However, you also indicated that AFRICOM campaign plan provides a sound construct to address these challenges, and you would thoroughly assess that plan if confirmed. So while I understand you haven't completed that assessment, I'm sure that's in process right now, I am curious as to your initial thoughts on how the United States can counter or respond to increases in both Chinese and Russian investment and activity in Africa to promote both peace and stability.
Senator, the relevation of the efforts of these two competitors probably won't be revealed for a few years. So in parallel, we just still need to engage with countries to stop this democratic backsliding and also authoritative regimes going towards the autocratic side by still engaging with these countries. Still engage with them to show that our assurance actions outweigh theirs. Our value proposition is real. Their value proposition is a farce. So it will take a couple of years for that to show because he sees the bright shining object, especially with China and their Belt and Road initiatives. But in the end, they just look globally of where it's failing. I know over 40 countries across the continent of Africa have already signed some type of memorandum of agreement, but we need to continue to engage.
Thank you, General. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Senator Peters. Let me recognize Senator Scott, please.
Thank you, Chair Reed. First off, thank you, both of you for your willingness to serve. Congratulations on your nominations, and thank you for your prior service. General Fenton, Florida is proud to be home of Socom. Do you think Socom is adequately funded, and do you think it has sufficient personnel to take on our adversaries across the globe wherever they are threatening or could threaten American interests?
Senator, in my current position, I don't know that I know the entirety of Socom in terms of resource challenges, funding challenges, and I would want to take that, if confirmed, and examine it fully with the Socom team. I can comment that right now they are around the globe addressing the challenge of China, Russia as the acute threat, and certainly the persistent threats that are counterterrorism or VEOs, and in Iran and North Korea. So I know they're arrayed, and as part of that team, I have experience of doing that myself. But the understanding at an enterprise level of Socom's resourcing challenges and manning challenges to the fullest extent, Senator, if confirmed, I'd like to take that and examine it more fully with the team.
Do you, if you feel like Socom is not adequately funded, don't have the sufficient personnel to take on our adversaries, will you come back to this committee? Will you be direct and tell us exactly what you believe?
Senator, I will come back and tell the committee directly and transparently and openly what I believe. And as I examine it, if confirmed with the Socom team, I will take a look, and I will absolutely report to the Secretary and the Chairman if I saw resourcing or challenge gaps, and report to the committee through the department.
What do our adversaries think of our abilities in Socom, and do you think they fear what the U.S. can do to them if they threaten our interests around the globe?
Senator, I wouldn't want to put myself in the mind of any of those adversaries and proffer for them, but I'll start with putting myself in the space of relationships of partners and allies that I've been around for many, many years. In my Indo-PACOM experience and in my time in Africa and certainly in the Middle East, we are, as your soft team, a partner of choice. We're combat credible. We build partners and allies, and we make friends versus would China make clients and customers? So from partners and allies, we are the force of choice, the soft team, and by extension, as I saw in Indo-PACOM, the entire U.S. team, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines there. My sense is that, combined with our combat credibility, again, I don't want to put myself in the minds of the adversaries, but it should cause them to pause and to know that this team has been tested, the U.S. military and soft team, and think very carefully about any moves that they would make against our forces. But I know what our partners and allies think, and I know our force knows it to be a credible, disciplined, reliable, and outcome force, and has seen in action, disrupting terror for 20 years, capturing or killing iconic leaders, competing with the Chinese and with the Russians. The soft team has done a wide remit that my sense is the adversaries are certainly taking note of.
Thank you. What lessons can SOCOM learn from Russia's invasion of Ukraine and apply to a potential invasion of Taiwan by Communist China?
Senator, I don't know if those lessons are instantly transferable from Ukraine to Taiwan, but my sense is that what we're learning from the Ukraine experience, and from my perspective, my optic, is that the powers of partners and allies, investing in relationships, strengthening relationships, and then the galvanizing of what comes together as a many of many's, vice the unprovoked invasion and the horrible activities of Russia inside of Ukraine. I think the other takeaway is asymmetric, atypical, the use of open source satellite imagery and modern technology, small UASs, is blunting and has denied Putin, in many ways, his desired objectives. I think that's an important takeaway. Then I would add the information operations, being in the infosphere and messaging and certainly being present to amplify voices for good and certainly to address what Russia is doing in that country. Those are, I think, very important takeaways from my perspective, Senator, that as I watch this, that I certainly note.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Senator Scott. Senator Tillis, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, thank you and your families for decades of service, and also thank you for the time you spent with me in my office this week. It was, I think, very helpful, and I should say from the onset, as I did earlier this week, I intend to support your confirmation. General Fenton, let's start with you. In the context of the recent national defense strategy and our current security environment, give me an idea of what your top priorities are going to be once confirmed.
Senator, thank you for that, and thank you for the meeting this week, and thank you for your support of all our military and your great state, and certainly at Fort Bragg. Thank you. Senator, I would start with, in my current position, my priorities are people, compete and win and transform. And I think specific to, if confirmed, what I would look at in SOCOM is humans more important than hardware. People are our number one priority. They are our comparative and competitive advantage. How they think in the soft community about problems, how they address them, and how they develop asymmetric, atypical options is key. And that, if confirmed, would potentially, it has been my priority now, might be the first priority. Compete and win, being ready, SOCOM ready for the nation for whatever is needed. That spans the China-Russia challenge, the counterterrorism challenge, and certainly the persistent threats of Iran and North Korea. And then transformation. These are the priorities in my current position. Transforming, first, our personnel, how we think for a contested, congested environment going forward. Then along with the technology, what type of technology, and then at the end, what type of organization is needed to support the nation as we go forward in this new environment and with the NDS in mind. So I take my lead from the NDS, and in my current position, people, win, transform are my priorities. And if confirmed, Senator, I certainly would like to consult with the Socom team, but those, I would offer, might be the starting place.
Thank you, General Langley. The prior administration moved nearly 700 personnel out of Somalia, redeployed them to Djibouti and Kenya. Now they rotate in on a limited basis. It would just seem to me, you're the military expert, but it just seems to me, one, have we increased risk and effectiveness by doing that, by not being on the ground at the level that we were prior to the redeployment?
Senator, in my professional opinion, I think we have. And I say that just one qualifier. Back in 2014, when we went to Tranche 2 out of Helmand Province, when the Marines pulled out and we said we were going to fly to advise, and 215th Corps was left to their own devices, Senator, they regressed. Their excellence on the battlefield regressed within a couple of months. So I know that's just an anecdotal assessment, but flight to advise, or as General Townsend says, commute to work is ineffective because partnership capacity will erode over time.
I agree. I think we need to be there. So I guess the next question is, when we're competing globally for ISR and things to remediate that, what should our priorities be? What should Congress be focused on moving forward to help you be successful with your assignment?
Sir, if confirmed, I would do a risk to mission, risk to force calculus. One, protecting the force, and as my esteemed colleague said, assessing the health of the force. Make sure we are taking care of our servicemen and women on the ground. Then matching up with our mission and seeing that we have all the capability and capacity necessary to do that. Personal recovery, medevac recovery, and be able to affect rapid response forces that can go to tyranny of distance across the continent to complete the mission.
Thank you. I guess the final question I have in the time remaining, I also wonder, with 700 personnel coming out of Somalia, do we have any evidence that that's actually, as we have exited, that malign influences from other nations, great power nations, or terrorist organizations have kind of taken advantage to create their presence and capacity in Somalia?
Sir, I don't have a purview on that right now, but my assumptions are that they'll probably be doing something to fill that void just like they did in Mali.
Yeah, I think so too. Well, gentlemen, again, congratulations to you and your family. I look forward to a speedy confirmation. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you very much, Senator Tillis. Senator Rosen is presiding, and she's on her way over, and there may be some other colleagues who join, which will give me the opportunity to ask an additional question. General Fenton, you've been asked several times about what lessons we've learned from Ukraine. I think one lesson is the willingness of a country to fight, and that goes from the top leadership down to the individual citizens, and also, as you mentioned before, the capability of their armed forces, but most significantly, the cadre of non-commissioned officers that are available. Is that an assessment that you're prepared to ask your special operators in each country of potential conflict to make and evaluate and inform you?
Senator, it would be. I would, if confirmed, be prepared to ask for that assessment. And I'll add that I echo your assessment on a country's willingness to fight. My sense is the investment that started in the SOF arena I can speak to, and certainly throughout the whole of EUCOM and EUCOM teams in 2014, took a military that may have been less mature with an understanding of non-commissioned officers, intent of a commander, the ability to move and understand intent, vice point-to-point orders or objectives, came as a result of U.S. SOF and U.S. military connection with the Ukrainian forces. My sense is, as well, from my perspective, Senator, is that that starts to go through the ranks, as you know very well, empowering and emboldening the military, but also the population with an even stronger will to fight. And I agree, that is one of the lessons learned, that investment early, a relationship with U.S. forces that is now exponentially being carried on by other forces who have been trained by us in that region as well, has been a part of that fabric.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I recall I first met General Cavoli in Lviv as we were touring the special operations training of Ukrainian forces, and back in 2014, I didn't realize the incredible impact it would make on the situation today, so thank you very much. We've been joined by Senator Sullivan, and if he's ready, I'm prepared to recognize him. Senator Sullivan, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, congratulations. You know, I do want to say for the committee, for the record, there's a lot of issues I have with the Biden administration's national security. President putting forward a weak defense budgets, unilaterally disarming one of our great comparative advantages against Russia and China, which is American energy. But I will compliment the President and his team. They have consistently put forward exceptional officers to serve at the highest levels of our combatant commands. And you two gentlemen are a continuation of that. I certainly plan on supporting your confirmations. I want to thank you and your families for your years of dedicated service. So again, I commend the White House on that. It's very important, and we keep getting really strong nominees for these very important positions. General Fenton, I wanted to talk a little bit about the Arctic, as you can imagine. The Army just stood up the 11th Airborne Division. So we now have 2 airborne divisions in the U.S. Army. One is in Alaska. But I will also say that when you look at great power competition, future sources of conflict, China, Russia, North Korea, one thing they all have in common is the potential for serious combat in serious, extreme cold weather, Arctic, mountainous environments. And I think our military has kind of lost that capability over the years, whether it's the Navy or the Army or the Marines, and including Special Forces. I've talked to a number of our soft components, and they say when training with foreign partners like the Finns or the Swedes, in these environments, we look like kind of the JV team relative to them. And as you know, you can't just take a unit and say, hey, go operate in 30 below. It takes years of training. So can you talk to me about this issue, preparedness as it relates to great power competition, but soft operating in the Arctic, in mountainous terrain, in severe cold weather? You know, my state has great training for that. I think we need to do more of it, and I think our forces need to be ready for it. And I don't think we are across the board. What do you think, General?
Senator, I first appreciate the discussion we had in your office the other day about this very issue. And it made me reflect on the time I had at Indo-PACOM, where we were beginning as a team in the Army and certainly at the Indo-PACOM greater level to focus and to examine the Arctic from its strategic importance, but more, as you've just pointed out, what does it mean to resource, man, train, and equip for that? In my current position, and I've been away from Indo-PACOM and that team for some time, I'm not I don't have all the visibility in where they've made great strides, but I knew what was on their minds in terms of mobility, survivability, and certainly conduct of missions in that very harsh environment. And I remember we used to talk about that environment compared to the ones we might see in Europe, and our phrase was, if you've seen one Arctic, you've seen one Arctic. And the understanding of each of those through its very tactile feel, I think similar to what we've seen in our experience in deserts and jungles. Senator, so if confirmed, I would like to examine that through the lens of the entire Socom team. This challenge of China, Russia, global, CT, Arctic, all demand a resourcing, equipping, training, and frankly, expeditionary strategy that would address that. But I don't know that I'm fully informed, Senator, to comment on whether we are doing it well right now or not. My sense is we can always get better. I'll put it that way.
Great, thank you. General Langley, I'm going to be introducing some legislation with Senator Whitehouse of Rhode Island here in the next week on a very strong bill that relates to IUU fishing. Now, I know that doesn't sound like a core competency of the Marine Corps or AFRICOM, but as you know, in that region, in your AOR for AFRICOM, this issue of maritime law enforcement program has been something we partnered with the countries in that region. And as you know, once again, it's China going all around the world, not abiding by the law, going to the coasts of Africa, the coasts of Latin America, and just ravaging their fishing fleets. We're going to have legislation that's going to really focus on pushing back on that, but we're going to need the cooperation of the Coast Guard, the Navy, AFRICOM, and others. So can I get your commitment to work with me and others, not just on this committee, but through the Senate on this important issue that the military does play an important role on?
Absolutely, Senator. That was a big issue at the Naval Infantry Symposium in Senegal. With the maritime exclusion zones for the African countries are at risk because usually they can't cover all that. So working with our Coast Guard and working with Brazil, they have their Blue Amazon concept that was ratified by the UN years ago. It's time to put it in action.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Senator Sullivan. Senator Rosen, please.
Thank you, Chairman Reed, and thank you for being here today, for your service to our country and your willingness to continue to serve. I'm really concerned about us preventing our captured ISIS fighters from returning to the battlefield. So, General Fenton, as we wait another possible Turkish military incursion into northern Syria, we know that the Syrian Democratic Forces guarding prisons will likely need to leave their posts for the border in order to defend their territory. This is going to open the door to the possible escape of captured ISIS fighters, just as we saw play out in 2019. So, General, given our partnership with the SDF and in the Defeat ISIS campaign, including security training, what plans do U.S. Special Operations Forces in Syria have to shore up SDF-run prisons? And if confirmed, how will you ensure that captured ISIS fighters do not ever return to the battlefield?
Senator, thank you for that, and we share your concern as those fighters and the prisons and the radicalization, all of that, when aggregated, is part of the CT threat that comes at this nation. On your question about the prisons and going forward, security, and in the event of other actions by actors like Turkey, I would defer to CENTCOM and to certainly the State Department on that. As in my current position, I don't have the visibility, certainly on their actions, and nor would I want to comment on them inappropriately. On the Socom going forward, if confirmed, Senator, I would like to get with the Socom team to examine it, to understand it fully, get a sense of the challenges that are in concert with General Kurilla and the CENTCOM team, and then certainly address it in a way that I'm much more informed and certainly ready to do.
Could you give me your opinion about last week's strike targeting ISIS-Wali of Syria and their ability to plan and carry out an attack? Does that make it less likely?
Senator, keeping the pressure on networks that have a demonstrated capability in the past, still have the willingness, and to diffuse and disrupt their capability is a key part of the counterterrorism strategy. In line with the national defense strategy, is what we need to be doing going forward. So my sense is anywhere we can keep the pressure on ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and in concert with AFRICOM, Al-Shabaab, we need to continue to keep a capability from growing inside of an organizations that have demonstrated and certainly have the willingness to attack this homeland.
Thank you. I'd like to move on to security deteriorations in CENTCOM and AFRICOM AORs, or areas of responsibility. So generals, based on your own experiences, the lessons that we've learned in Afghanistan over the last 20 years and in the lead up to its collapse, I'd really like both of your assessments on possible security deteriorations elsewhere in CENTCOM AOR and the AFRICOM AOR, where corruption, dependence on U.S. security assistance, political fragmentation, malign foreign influences such as we know Iran, Russia, China, they threaten our security cooperation efforts. And if confirmed, what would you each do to address the challenges? General Langley, we could start with you and move on to General Fenton, please.
Senator, just looking at AFRICOM, just at AOR, and seeing how the population growth and new ideology is starting to take root as it comes out of North Africa, and then now, before you know it, Boko Haram is kind of degraded, but up pops JNIM, up pops ISIS Sahara. So it is growing at a rapid rate. We have to be able to measure it, resources to readiness, resources to capabilities, and if confirmed, I would have to go back to the DOD and ask the Secretary and have a proof of concept and proof of principle how to attack it. But it's going to be a whole government approach. We know that we're in a support role, but there are some intrinsic type capabilities that we must maintain. ISR, casualty, personal recovery, medevac, and all the other programs with our joint exercise program to be able to thwart the BEOs.
Thank you. General Fenton, please.
Senator, if confirmed, I would start by consulting with the current CENTCOM and current AFRICOM commanders. But I would offer that in both those regions, violent extremist organizations are present. China is present. Russia is present. Other malign actors are present as well. And when put together, they do contribute to the instability in those regions. That my sense is that the CENTCOM command team in the Central Command area and the AFRICOM command team are addressing as part of, as General Langley said, whole of government efforts, and in many ways in concert with partners and allies.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Rosen. Senator Hawley, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks to both of you for your service. Thank you for being here. General Fenton, if I could start with you. It was good to see you the other day. Enjoyed our conversation. One of the things we talked about was that after 20 years of a focus on CT, counterterrorism, SOF's #1 priority now has to shift to deterring China. Am I remembering that correctly? Does that sound right to you?
Senator, you are remembering correctly that my perspective to you was aligned with the NDS. China's a pacing challenge. Russia's the acute threat, and then persistent threats of CT and Iran and North Korea are the focus.
Very good. Let me ask you about the pacing challenge and also our pacing scenario and our pacing theater. The pacing scenario being China's threat to Taiwan. You and I talked some about this. Admiral Davidson testified to this committee back in March of 2021. I'm going to quote him. I think the threat is manifest during this decade, in fact, in the next 6 years. And he's talking about the Chinese threat to Taiwan. And other officials who have come before the committee since then, including Admiral Aquilino, Undersecretary Call, Deputy Undersecretary Baker, have all agreed with that assessment. Do you agree with that assessment, General?
Senator, as we discussed, in my Indo-PACOM experience, 5.5 years, I was presented with a number of timelines, but they had a consistent theme. They all grew closer. Started in about 2035, 2037, and they continued to grow closer based on China's military acceleration, its economic and diplomatic acceleration, and the ways that they do. So my sense is that plus a directive from the President Xi Jinping, to his military to have a capability by this decade. It is in this decade.
Very good. Very good. This decade's the one we need to be concerned with this decade, of course, and beyond, but with this decade. Thanks for that. Given that, what are some of the unique capabilities in your view, including warfighting capabilities, that Socom can bring to that pacing challenge, that is the Taiwan challenge? Walk us through your thinking on that.
Senator, my sense is in the Indo-PACOM region, and I speak from my time there, and I will defer to Admiral Aquilino, if confirmed, and get a holistic assessment. But my time there, I saw a number of capabilities that SOF brought. First and foremost was placement, access, and influence. The ability to be in a number of countries throughout that region, training, advising, and assisting, being partnered, real partners and allies and friends with the nations in that region. That then turned into a partner and ally, many of many's capability that has been shown, certainly in Ukraine, to be extremely powerful for not only the U.S. but the Ukrainians and frankly for the world as it fights that type of aggression. The next thing I saw was that the exercises and the training we did in that region consistently with all the forces, Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines, brought a confidence to that region and also a competence in terms of what they learned as we trained with them, stayed with them, ate, had many discussions, and were just part of the fabric. All of that developed multiple options for the COCOM team, and again, I defer, and I've confirmed I'd like to check with Admiral Aquilino and Special Ops team. Multiple options that were helpful to the Indo-PACOM team and multiple dilemmas for China. I would also add that China, with its global presence, that if confirmed at SOCOM, I would like to consult with all COCOMs to see if that's the same recipe across the globe.
Let me just pick up on that your last comment there about options. If you're confirmed, General, would you prioritize developing warfighting capabilities for a Taiwan scenario so that the President has multiple options in order to deter China from that pacing scenario?
Senator, what I commit to today is the SOCOM team I know is ready with ranges of options for the COCOM commanders at all times. I will commit that if confirmed, I will certainly be with the SOCOM team, examine it closely, but my experience is the SOCOM team is ready and will remain ready, competing, contesting, and developing a range of options if needed for the joint force in high-end conflict, and it does it every day.
Let me ask you this. You've been asked a couple of times already today about balancing the continuing counterterrorism threat and our needs there with the need to deter China in our pacing theater. The 2018 NDS spoke about the need for a resource-sustainable approach to counterterrorism. The 2022 NDS echoes that. Just give us a sense of, if you're confirmed, how you'll seek to develop and implement a resource-sustainable approach to counterterrorism. And I'm going to yield. My time's expired, so I'll yield back for you to answer, and then I'll yield, Mr. Chairman.
Senator, if confirmed, I would start by bringing to the SOCOM team my mindset. And the mindset is that special operations forces are really born for where we are right now in this point in history. The origins of special operations from the 50s to compete, contest, and campaign at that time against the USSR and communism with language, cultural attuneness, speed it through the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s. We only got better. We added the Army, Navy, and Air Force, Marines were all added to the soft component. And we learned how to be a valuable and integral part of our joint force team at our various training centers. My sense is that still holds. When you take the 20 years of combat, sustained combat, credible forces ours across the entire military, but I speak in my experience for SOF, that are fluent in technology, understand networks. China and Russia have networks, how to attack them, how to dismantle them, and the partners and allies that have been on that journey. When you bring that all together as we go forward in the future, I think I start there, that SOF in many ways was born for this. It has the ability to account as part of the whole of government team and interagency team for the counterterrorism mission while addressing the challenge of China and Russia, competing, contesting, campaigning in many ways, Senator. We never left. In my Indo-PACOM experience, I was doing compete, contest with Chinese in 2016, while my teammates and partners and all of our military were the height of an ISIS fight in Syria. And SOF was there as well. So we have this in our DNA to account for the CT, bring value in that to the nation for in an enduring, sustainable way, but also to be a very integral player for COCOMs and for the department and the whole of government in the campaign against China and Russia. Thanks, sir.
Senator Hawley, thank you. Senator Gillibrand is here, and we appreciate her presence, but I believe that you're no questions. Senator Sullivan is recognized for one terse, penetrating, and insightful question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's typically the way in which I ask
Typical,
questions.
yes, I know.
But not always. General Fenton, I want to dig in a little deeper on what Senator Hawley just discussed and you and I discussed in my office, because I think it's important to talk about it a little bit more in depth and in public. Again, I think your background, significant background in the Indo-PACOM theater makes you very, very qualified for this position. You mentioned, and I think we're all recognizing the incredible role, exceptional role that Socom has played post 9/11, 20 years, CT, sustained combat, as you mentioned. But culturally, there's obviously going to be a shift, less kinetic, more strategic shaping, and how do you think the force and morale and the entire Socom enterprise is going to be ready for that? Because it does seem to me a very different approach that's likely going to be with you as a key component of your command, particularly in the Indo-PACOM theater, recognizing China as the pacing threat, than the way the forces have operated primarily in the Middle East in a much more kinetic fashion. Is Socom ready for that, and how do you prepare the force to do that?
Senator, from my perspective, and I certainly, if confirmed, would want to check in with the entirety of the Socom team, but I do get to see a portion of the Socom enterprise and have been in many portions of the Socom enterprise. But in my experience, it is a combination of, back to our origins, what we were born to do as a soft enterprise. It's in our DNA, and we, in some ways, probably had to tailor ourselves to do the exquisite CT work we've done for 20 years. I don't think that leaves the force. We will, through alignment with the NDS, account for the counterterrorism mission. So we will have to continue to address that. My sense is that that will be with us for some time. Folks who are who wish to attack, who have demonstrated intent, and we need to keep them from having that capability, will have to be addressed. And portions of the Socom formation may certainly have as a primary remit. On top of that, the form factor of CT and CT train, advise, and assist is also an ability to compete and to contest with military relationships with partners and allies, building them and building that trust, showing the Special Ops Force as a force of choice, along with the U.S. military as a force of choice. And that in and of itself is also an opportunity to compete and contest. I do know in my own experience, much of what I was doing at the 2016, 2017 time in Indo-PACOM was competing, contesting, and the forces arrayed at that brought in incredible combat experience and understanding, and we're also eager to compete and contest in that way against China. So, Senator, I would end with, my sense is that the force that has been built for this has it in its DNA, will be able to account for, in formations, understanding that, the China-Russia challenge and the CT threat. And in many ways, I think I will say personally, as a special operations member for 30-plus years, we welcome that challenge.
Thank you, Senator Sullivan. General, thank you for your excellent testimony. I think you appreciate the confidence that this committee has in you, and as I indicated previously, we're going to do our best to expedite the confirmation process so that you can make a smooth transition into your new commands. And again, thank you all. Thank your families for joining you. With that, I will adjourn this hearing.
Thank you, Senator.